Hello and welcome again to TelecomTV. My name is Martin Warwick. We're here in San Francisco in California at IDF 2015. That's the Intel Developers Forum. I'm talking with Klaus Pedersen, Director Telecommunications Infrastructure, HP Servers. Klaus, good to see you again. Both just flown in from Europe, so if we get through this, we'll be doing well, but we'll try without falling off the chairs. But great to see you. I'd like to begin by asking you about this. One of the things that seems to me to very much be characteristic of what's happening with NFV are these long-term, deep collaborations between companies that in the past may not have ever worked together in any sort of anything like that, because this is a much deeper, much longer process of NFV. You've been in this, HP's been in this from day one, so has Intel. What do you make of the progress?
Well, I think the ecosystem of collaborators are growing much wider at the moment. Out of necessity, it's necessary in order for NFV to succeed. And with that also the collaborations are gradually going deeper in terms of understanding what's necessary at the infrastructure level to get all these elements of applications, management, servers, etc. to play together. Because NFV represents a very big technical shift, but also a very big disaggregation of the value chain, where we are moving much closer to the IT model of being able to use best of breed components. And that's not how a typical telecommunications network have been built in the past.
Indeed.
So yeah, the collaboration is necessary, and I'm glad to see here at IDF and the Intel Network Builder Forum that all the companies that are present here and collaborating in various ways to enable this refresh, if you will, of the telecommunications industry for the next set of services.
Is it a refresh or a reset? I mean, because, you know, as we've just mentioned, one of the things that characterized the telecommunications sector of old was the time it took to make change, the whole procurement process, the length of time to get a new switch and so on. That's all changing with NFV. And as you mentioned, it's the move over to an IT-like infrastructure and environment which hasn't occurred before. And are telecoms companies finding this particularly difficult to do?
Well, and that's why it can't be a reset. You can't turn the phone off. We have to keep it running, and that means that all the infrastructure that are there today has to work in connection with the new way of implementing things as we evolve the networks. So it will be a reset in the way that technology is procured and deployed to enable new services, but we have to take into account that this has to also take the old infrastructure forward without breaking it for quite some time to come. So yes, it's very hard. It impacts not just the technology, but really all the operational processes and other aspect of the telecommunication operators network. So in that sense, it is a reset, but no, we can't turn off the phone.
Indeed, although there is some talk of bits of the PSTN being switched off in due course, but that's not really that much to do with NFV.
That is true.
Anyway, let's move on. The technology of NFV is now proven. We've been through, you know, the proofs of concept, the tests in the lab and so on, and we're moving closer towards commercial deployment. There are some limited ones out there at the moment. Do you think, and this might sound like a strange question, but do you think NFV is a technology in search of a place to be used, or is it vital going forward for the entirety of the globe's telecommunications network?
It's absolutely vital in order to ensure that the networks become an infrastructure upon which you can now build services rather than being the service in its own right. So in that sense, it's a strategy, it's a way of evolution that it must happen. On the other hand, you could also say it's a tool in the sense that the technology that NFV brings with it, if you view it as technology, is not that interesting. We've seen it used in IT, and it's the same principles. And the next phase here is to identify where and how it can be deployed in profitable manners, and also how it can be deployed without breaking what's already there and continue to deliver the reliability that we got used to from the world's largest technology infrastructure. So I would say it's both in terms of a disruption of the technology, but also a whole new set of tools that we can apply to different problems.
The IT sector is characterised by being very vibrant in terms of the competition that's there, in terms of the innovation that happens, and so on. And again, without wishing to sort of diss the telecoms industry in general, but a few years ago, the telecoms industry wasn't like that. How difficult do you think it's going to be for the acceptance and the move towards a properly, fully fledged, vibrant, IT-like environment for telecoms?
Yeah, first I want to dismiss the idea that there was no competition. I think
well,
the competition was very, very hard, to the point where there was not that many vendors left because they were fighting so hard for the business. But it was a different kind of competition, because the requirements of the vendors was to be able to build end-to-end systems where they supplied everything right from the technology to the delivery services and all the SLAs that came with it. And that's where NFV, as a way of implementing things, is opening up. And by layering the network into infrastructure separate from applications, you're now getting competition, innovation at each layer independently through what used to be a closed environment now have many more points where you can attach your technology, open interfaces, open implementation, particularly the use of open source. Breaks down the barrier of entry for companies that can bring new ideas into the industry. And that again comes back to the collaboration. If all that doesn't interoperate, it's not going to work. So I think that's how it'll naturally come about, as we get that layering right. And we are still looking at how to do that as an industry. But once we get that layering right, we will get naturally the competition at the different layers, and with that, the innovation.
Of course, the hype machine would have us believe that in the ideal circumstance, all that a telecoms company would have to do would be to take a white box down from a shelf somewhere and plug it in. But as you mentioned to me off camera, not all servers are born equal or made equal. What do you mean by that?
Well, again, if you want to build big scale-out infrastructure for a very homogeneous set of applications, that is done and well understood how we do that in very large data centers, and there are many examples of that that we're all aware of. But if you look at a telecommunications infrastructure, it consists of a large number of very heterogeneous applications, and the way to make such an infrastructure highly available and reliable, you do that by having smart infrastructure that can accommodate the different failure models, the different execution models, the different type of storage, the different type of networking that is necessary. And for some time to come, the applications will not be evolved enough to just run on a completely naive infrastructure. Will all that smarts really add to the ability to make it work and make it highly reliable? And if we look back at what's happened in telecommunications, it's not like there's no servers in the network.
No.
There are lots of them. And it has primarily been through the equipment providers adopting, to a large extent, HP enterprise servers as part of their solutions, and very much taking advantage of all the smarts that are built into those type of servers. All that smarts allow you to upgrade your BIOS, manage your servers down to a very fine level to understand failures, etc., which you don't get from the cheapest server you can get today. Of course, we're all looking towards the world where we can use a large scale-out infrastructure, because for many applications it's the most cost-effective. But it'll be some time before telecom is ready for that.
One of the other major changes which the telecommunications sector is facing is the fact that their world's literally being turned upside down in terms of standardization, at least. And mind the technology, I mean, in the past it's always been standards-driven, slow process. Now it's the other way around. You deploy this kit, check it out, see how it works, see where the faults are, see where the benefits are, and then standardize. Again, that must be a major problem for some telcos.
Well, it is, in the sense that when you do things that way around, to get innovation in, you start using technology that is not really proven. Whereas before, the vendors, what they did was we agreed on standards that were primarily around protocols, and then you compete on implementation. Open source is about agreeing on implementation, even if it's not completely standardized. So it means that a vendor that is working in this domain will be innovating in open source in order to support some of their proprietary application solutions. And that means that open source needs to make it back in and represents a gray area with a lack of standardization. It takes some time before it makes it upstream in the open source tree and then come back down and can be adopted by all. And yeah, that's completely opposite and different to try to agree on implementation as opposed to standardize the protocols up front. But it gives that level of innovation and agility that we've seen in the IT and cloud world.
It's fascinating to see the changes as they happen and where the resistance is and where people are worried about it. And the, change, not everybody likes change, and telcos have always been infamous in the past for not liking change at all, but they're going to have to this time. Let's go back to HP, Klaus, if we could, for a moment. Presumably, as far as you're concerned, as far as the vendors are concerned, we've talked about your partnership with Intel, this requires considerable and continual investment on your part to stay abreast and to keep the technology going and what changes. How committed is HP to that?
Oh, but we've been very committed to that from long before NFV actually started, at least on the infrastructure layer. We have been supplying IT technology into the telecommunications network directly and also via our equipment provider vendors that have OEM'd our platforms for quite some time. And in order to achieve that, we have invested heavily in taking our standard servers and making them fit for telecom through small variations that allow us to still leverage our volume manufacture and innovation that goes into the IT enterprise servers, but then bring them to telecom. And that now continues with NFV. We're making big investments in the software layers around packet processing, etc., because there's a lot of work to be done there before the whole combination of servers, interface cards, drivers, all of that work together and is rock solid. And then on top of that, qualifying things like our Helion OpenStack and the VNFs to sit on top of it that we do through our very large Open NFV partner program that are bringing in the VNFs and taking risk out of the deployment for the carriers.
Final question to you, which is looking forward. We always look forward in these interviews, what's going to happen next. General question really, what kind of NFV deployments do you anticipate there will be out there within the next 12 months?
Well, I think there's two different ways that we see carriers approach it. One is similar to what the IT industry has done in terms of trying to achieve consistency of their infrastructure first. So create an infrastructure strategy, and then whatever deployment projects you have, you insist that at least you deploy on that infrastructure for the new solutions. Other opportunities we see is around the virtual managed services, virtual CPE in the core with EPC, IMS, where specific solutions are being deployed on NFV infrastructure, following NFV principles, if you will, for specific applications. The challenge for the carrier is typically to manage the project so that there is the right risk-return profile. Because again, we can't afford that somebody who wants to call 911 that gets blocked because some open source component didn't work. And the carriers are well aware of that because it is a highly regulated industry. And so as such, we see many different types of projects, and the thing is always to find where's the money for that one.
Well, very interesting as usual. And again, as usual, Klaus Pedersen, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.